With that, I want to welcome you to Historical Approaches for Self-Advocates, the first panel of our 2025 gala. This marks our sixth virtual gala at ASAN. This approach to gathering has opened up our event to our whole community, allowing for participation from across the country and beyond. Our gala would not be possible without the community that surrounds us. From our grassroots members to our organizational donors, this event is able to take place because of the support we receive from people like you. And to that, I say thank you so much. Your support in buying a ticket goes directly to this cause. If you are interested in continuing your support for ASAN and its mission, please consider becoming a member or increasing your membership if possible. We offer a variety of levels with different perks. Membership starts at as little as $3 a month. And for more information, please visit the link in the chat. We note that the views expressed by our guests and presenters are their own and not ASAN's. And with that, I will move us into our panel. So I'm going to start with introductions, and going off of my screen, Anita, I'm going to pass it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anita Cameron. I am a Black person with caramel-colored skin, long locks. I have black headphones on for hearing access, and a black hoodie. I am a disability justice activist. I hail from Chicago, Illinois, but I've lived all over. I've been doing organizing and activism for 44 years. I've been in the disability activist world for 39 years, almost 40, and that's me. Thank you.
I'll pass it to Liz.
And my name is Liz Weintraub. I have black hair, brownish, I guess brownish, silverish, glasses. I'm a white woman with a maroon sweater as well as a turtleneck. Turtleneck, and I'm the Senior Advocacy Specialist at AUCD, the Association for University Centers on Disability. We have at least one center in every state that works with our members on advocacy and standing up for our rights. We have begun to do some more work with ASAN, so we're very excited to work with you on a project. And I've been in the field for probably 25 years, first as a volunteer and now as a professional. I was the first vice president of South Africa's Becoming Empowered shape. And that's who I am. And it's nice to be here.
And then thank you, Liz, and I'll pass it to Candace. Oh, Candace, you're still on mute.
I'm Dr. Candace Cole-McCrae. I'm a retired professor emeritus in social sciences. I have a calling of doing free counseling to people in need usually on Zoom or local if people can travel to me. I do that. I'm a writer, a lot of other things, but and I wear many hats in this community because um, I was as an infant, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. How you do that with an infant, I don't know. Um, I was seen as catastrophically physically deformed, so spent 7 years in an institution as a child. I use a wheelchair now. I was later diagnosed. I have a dyslexia, but I was diagnosed as having an IQ of 60 because I couldn't read well. I was given improper medication at one point and was blind for 10 years. Um, I had my biological son kidnapped from me, and the government decide that nobody should do anything because they would be better off with whoever kidnapped them than with a seriously disabled adult person, parent. So I, I, and I'm half Native American Indian. So I've been through the whole history. I'm 77 years old with this. And and I have clinical and academic background. Thank you.
Skylar, I've got to say that I'm the host of Disability Policy for All, where I attempt to explain things in policy that in plain language that is related to policy. Like, for example, um, next month is the 50th anniversary of IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act, where I have done a lot of the series, a lot of the reels um, about IDEA as well as other kinds of things. Um, I started doing a the YouTube show about 16 years ago, 17 years ago, maybe 16, 15. Anyway, and now just have grown to do a reel. We have grown up to do a reel. So look for that.
And I
Awesome.
forgot to mention, I have an adopted son with autism.
Skylar, this is Anita.
Mhm.
I neglected to tell you that I am president and founder. We were there too, Blacks in the Disability Movement. It's a historical project to highlight the participation of Black people in the disability movement. Those who know me know that I come from a Black existence. I am Afro Latina and Choctaw, but hey, you know, uh, in the 70s, the freedmen and mixed folks were disenrolled from the Choctaw. So, and I have very little connection with my Afro Latina. I was because my dad came to this country and wanted to assimilate, and he did so quite well. And so I was raised in the Black community from a Black experience, and and I'm pretty firm and, shall we say, militant, um, about that, and it shows up when I speak, and it shows up in my work. So just letting you know, when you get Anita Cameron, you get Anita Cameron, and Anita Cameron is not necessarily for the faint of heart. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for these great introductions. I've been so excited about this panel as we have been planning it for the past few months. and especially just having all of y'all's professional and lived experience inside of this room as we look at the self advocacy movement, just disability advocacy, where it's been, where it is, what we'd hope to see in the future throughout the theme of this gala. And with that, I'd like to move into our first question, which is, how has the self advocacy movement changed since you first entered it? How has it stayed the same? And I am going to start that off with Liz.
Thanks, Skylar. Um, and this is just my opinion, um, because I think I'm one of the few South Africans, one of the few friends of mine um, that um, when I say the word self advocacy, I don't necessarily like it anymore. Although I have grown up with the same movement. When I say grow up, I mean the way how I got to here, how I got to this place is because the same self advocates becoming empowered, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for my friends Tia Nellis and Nancy Ward who helped me learn how to speak up for myself. I didn't know how to speak up for myself. I did whatever mom and dad told me to do. They told me to go into a private institution, private residential placement. I did that because that's what what my parents told me to do, and I do. I learned from a young age that you do what your mom and dad tells you to do. Um, but um, now I'm not necessarily agreeing with the word self advocacy, because that's self. It bothers me. I'm a self advocate when I talk to my husband or when I talk to my boss about what I want and ACD or what I need from them, or even that I wanted to do this panel. I said yes, I'll do this. Or when my husband asks me what I want for dinner, I'll say I want chicken or meat. Um, Chicken or beef or whatever. But when I'm here, I'm an advocate just like anyone else. When I'm on the hill, when I'm on the hill advocating for what people want, and these days that's a tall order with this administration. There's a lot going on with RFK to President Trump. There's so many things going on. Um, but they're not for just Liz Weintraub. I'm there for the disability community. And therefore, I need to be an advocate just like anyone else. If my my boss or my friends can be an advocate for people with disability. Why can't I be? I think it's becoming another word, another buzzword. And when I say buzzword or a nicer word than the R word or what I call the C word or the H word, and I hope everyone knows what. I'm assuming you all know what the R word mean, but the C word and the H word, do people know what I mean? If you don't, I'll put them in the chat. Um, um, so I think of people as people say, um, I must have Liz Weintraub as a self advocate is a nicer word than Liz Weintraub, the client or whatever, or the handicapped person. Um, that I said that those words. Um, I also think that people now value who what we can do. Um, People value organization like ASAN or self advocates becoming in power. I see ASAN being very, very strong, um, strong organizations that you don't mess with them. Um, you don't mess with John Paulus. And when John Paulus speaks, and I apologize for butchering your name, um, but he talks the truth. Um, so those are my ideas.
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm going to pass it over to Candace.
Thank you. Uh, the self-advocacy group has movement in my life began the same time Johnson was president. And if it weren't for things that he did, I don't know how far we would have gotten, but it sure gave us ground to move forward. And because when he was when he was president, first time we had the new disability laws of access, and what I heard as a young adult at that time was they couldn't stop me anymore. They couldn't stop me from riding on a bus or going to school or voting, native rights, whatever. They couldn't stop me for the first time. Um, and that brought up this movement. But I do agree with Liz that the term self advocacy may not be doing us justice. I was watching the news last night from Jamaica, and I saw that towns were isolated from this hurricane, and that all these people got out to clear the roads and move the ambulances and help people through. And I thought, how sad it is that in America, we don't automatically do that, that they're all out helping each other. And we sit in our houses and wait for a professional to come. And if they don't come, we get angry. We don't just reach out and help. And for me, all of the great movement, the work we have done to become uh, respected and accepted and heard and seen in our community is really important. But it's really important that it doesn't just become self advocates. Because if I'm sitting in a room trying to advocate for myself, I'm defending myself against a history of medical knowledge and psychiatric knowledge and law and religions. I'm defending myself alone. But if it's we advocacy, we're all in it. And that gives us the strength that the people of Jamaica have when they all chip in to fix the roads. And so I think that For me, we is very important, far more important than I.
Thank you so much, Candace. I'm going to pass it to Anita.
Well, I'm going to be quite frank. I I've always seen myself as an activist. Um, First, then an advocate. And to be quite frank, I never really saw myself as a self advocate. I got into this, I was born in 1965, and I was born too late to participate in the civil rights movement for Black folks. And I felt very gifted when I was a kid. Disabled kids, we didn't have the right to an education. And the only reason I was allowed to go to regular public school was that I was gifted. But um, and when I was a kid, no one was diagnosing Black people as autistic. Autism was a white boy thing. So if you were a girl, certainly if you were a little Black girl, you weren't going to get diagnosed autistic back in those days, even though, as I said, I was considered gifted. So at a very young age, I was reading university level. I read about autism and knew that, yeah, you could put my picture in the dictionary under the definition, but I didn't get my diagnosis until I was 43. And so, I come from, not only, discrimination based on disability. And when I was in the fifth grade, you know, the law that would become the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act came in. My teachers were very enthusiastic. I got all of the accommodations and all of that stuff, except it stopped once I got to high school because they said, you're gifted, so you don't need this. So they determined that because I was smart, I guess that would like sure deal with the blindness, or the other, stuff. So, I went through university, got kicked out of med school because, my vision, losing more vision, seizures out of control. I didn't have those supports. They said, go find another career path. And I wound up in disability field, working at Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, and then getting into, independent living. I couldn't get a job in my field, because who wants to hire disabled scientists? I couldn't, when I went back to school and got that second degree, I still couldn't get hired. But, I wasn't doing things for me. See, when I was a kid, I didn't grow up around other disabled. I didn't have any mentors or anything like that. Thankfully, my teachers tried to advocate for me, and all. So, I just kind of drifted, you know, wherever. I knew that there was injustice in the world. At the age of 9, I made a vow that I would work to make the world a better place for everyone, not just me. And I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like. until I was 16 years old, and I got involved in social justice and social change movement. And I got involved in a number of movements from peace and justice and anti-nuclear, anti-apartheid. I work with houseless people. I work with immigration lawyers. I work, with the LGBTQ community because, of course, I'm queer. And then, quite by accident, I discovered the disability community. I discovered Adapt, and joined and was involved in all kinds of amazing stuff, including the Capitol Crawl, which is my background. That's me going up the Capitol steps after I crawled up, been involved in so much stuff, but I never saw it as being an activist or advocating for me. I was always advocating for everyone else. I always said, this is bigger than Anita Cameron, and so to be quite frank, I just never, I mean, I get it why the self advocacy movement started or had to start. Um, but I agree, with Liz and Candace, it's not really doing us, any justice. And self advocacy implies that you're only advocating for, to me, in my mind, um, and my perceptions, I'm autistic, so my perceptions aren't always, what everybody else's is. But to me, a self advocate is advocating only for themselves. Um, uh, and it's always been, like I said, I've been an activist and organizer since the age of 16, and it's always been about everybody, not just about me. And so maybe, the self, the movement, will have to, you know, um, it'll have to evolve, I guess, in a way. I mean, when I, you know, my experience is vastly different to Liz and Candace's. And um, I am not seen as a professional. Um, I have worked, for um, independent living centers. I worked for Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. I've done policy. I've helped to write legislation. I've done, I've worked individually, uh, with pretty much you name it. My name isn't out there. I'm not known for that. I'm known for getting arrested and going to jail. That's pretty much, if you hear my name, that's what I'm associated with. So I'm not a professional. Um, I'm one of those. I am, the militant ragtag radicals that was out in the street blocking buses and shutting down buildings. I was not walking the halls of Congress until much later. I didn't even start out, to be who I am. I was just an activist, an idealistic young person, looking for home. I was 21 years old when I joined the disability movement. And it was different. And, because like I said, I'm coming at it from somebody Black. And so if there's any improvement, maybe it's more inclusion of communities of color. Maybe, I guess. But we really still are not really welcome in this movement. Um, Certainly not people like me. You have to be nice and professional and upstanding and speak deliberately, and all, and not be, um, well, certainly not be Anita Cameron. Um, and so there's been more inclusion, if you will, somewhat tokenary inclusion of non-whites and non-men, um, but still has a long way to go. We really aren't dealing with uh, intersectionality and true disability justice. Unfortunately, I tried to bring intersectional justice, to when I was active in ADAPT, and that was a failure because we still aren't ready to talk about the real serious things. We're still scared to talk about race. We're still scared to look outside of, we think of disability as disability and not that, because I'm a disabled Black queer person, queer femme androgynous person. And, so I get it from all different ways, and there's all different kinds of dangers and whatnot. And so I'm going to look at the world and um, move in the world, you know, different. It's dangerous in this day and age to be out in the trenches. I was out in the trenches for dang near 40 years. Um, it's dangerous to do that. We're living in, a world where um, people are given permission now to openly hate on disabled people. And so, as disabled people, is we are, I don't know, like I said, it might be, for lack of better words, I don't know, sacrilege to say that perhaps the self advocacy movement has kind of run its course and it needs to evolve into, more, really for the community, because I think that's what self advocates were doing all along, really. Um, and maybe that's just me not, really, seeing or knowing or really existing, you know, um, in in that in that world, because we have our own in the disability community, we have our own biases, lateral ableism, you know, um, towards each other, and depending on what your disability is, you may not fare as well, you know, uh, as someone whose disability or support needs or level of support needs or communication and all are different. So um, and full disclosure, I was honored by Autistic Advocacy Network in 2018 with their Service to the Self Advocacy Movement Award. For the work that I'd done with Adapt and Not Dead Yet. But I always saw myself as being an activist and advocating for everyone, not just for myself. But like I said, I understand the need and where it came about. And isn't that the way it always is? I mean, things evolve, our community evolves, the movement evolves. It used to be back in the day, and I remember I wrote papers on it on people first language. And we've evolved to, identity first or a combination thereof. And so, the, the movement is evolving, and that's always a good thing. And so that's where I am, with it. I really didn't come up in the movement. um I really don't see myself as a self advocate, but I believe that the self advocacy movement is and should evolve and kind of joining in and blending in with the greater disability justice movement. And that's something we don't talk about very much. There's disability rights.
Oh, hey,
There's
Anita.
just, oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I just want to make sure that we're staying on track and for the next question. Would I be able to start on that one?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
No,
Uh,
no, I really apologize because I do, go off. I tend to,
you're good.
yeah, stream of
Um,
justice.
so
So.
we had this question of just if there was one lesson that you learned early on in in your advocacy work, and inside the advocacy movie that advocacy movement, what would be that one lesson that you think would that still works today and that you'd like to share? And I'm going to start with Candace.
I keep muting myself because I have a dog. I don't want him speaking over me. Um, as Anita pointed out, we do have biases. And one of the biases I had to overcome is the prejudices from being a poor half breed, um, who was disabled in extreme poverty growing up, and over time turning myself into someone who was very accomplished and, as can be said, in some ways, a professional. And finding that there's prejudice against that as well. And what has helped me through, and has I've helped other people through the same thing, is I just tell people to just become your potential and don't let the society dictate through its opinions what that is. Just become your potential. And um, and when I talk to people, like I tell you, I counsel. When I counsel people, one of the things I look for is I look for, when they're talking to me, what makes them sparkle. And when they sparkle, I know they've hit on something that they wish could happen, but society somehow, or somebody, medical people, whatever, is holding them back. And what I want to do is I want to work with other people to lift those barriers. They're socially induced and they're self-induced. I would have never believed that I could do what I do in my life. If you look at my background, you would never think it's possible. I had a friend in Texas who died uh, a little over a year ago, and he was an outstanding attorney for justice. Incredible. He did it all from an iron lung. He realized that while he was in this iron lung, one of the things he could do was speak. He even went to court in an iron lung. But when we work together, there is so much that is possible. if we don't give in to the limitations that have been imposed upon us. And that's something that's just really, really important for me. And important for me, I love the saying, be good trouble, do good trouble. But also, it needs to be paired with do good work. I have that what I have found all my life is whenever I would do something, people would try to nitpick it apart because they knew it couldn't be good work because of my disabilities and my history, because I was homeless in Los Angeles, because all these things. I couldn't be good enough. And what I had to do, excuse me, was just do my best work all the time. And I think I have a saying, we're always teaching. The question is, what are we teaching? Everybody is always teaching. And as a person out there with significant disabilities, I'm always teaching wherever I go, how I behave, what I do, what I'm involved in, and everything says, yes, we can, or it says, you're right, we should go back and hide. And I don't want to ever say that. I want to say, yes, we can. Open the doors for more. Open the doors for us. We belong here. And that's what I want to say. That so for example, and I think about that all the time. I get called upon often to testify in cases of mental illness who are criminals in court. If I have to testify before with an attorney or a judge, I don't know. I don't go in and do it because, as both Liz and Anita have talked about, self-advocacy. If I just go in there in my wheelchair, I'm going to be taken with a grain of salt. But what I do first is I do a phone interview where they have to see when they talk to me that I know what I'm doing. My expertise is there. Then I go in and they're shocked to find out that this person who knows so much is sitting in a wheelchair. But it allowed me to present myself in a way that maximized the benefits for the people I serve. And that's what I always want to be aware of. It isn't just self, it isn't just me. I carry a mantle. I go forward, as early Blacks did, as Native Americans, as women have done, have trans have done. We carry a mantle. And I'm responsible for that mantle for the next generation.
Thank you so much for sharing, Candace. I'm going to move to Anita for that same question. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm going to defer to Liz. May I?
Yeah, please do. Liz, to you.
I'll go after Liz.
Oh, Liz, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think the biggest lesson was and is still nothing about us without us. And I love the fact that your motto at ASAN is that. Because how true is that? There are so many times, and I'm afraid to say, I'm sad to say this, is still happening in 2025, almost 26, that we're not at the table. And I can tell you that a story that is about me personally. I said that before, I don't want to be a South African because this movement is larger than my issues. But since I am a South African. And this happened when I was probably 20, and my it happened during Thanksgiving weekend, and at Thanksgiving, the my entire family get together with aunts and uncles and cousins. And, um, now we don't have that kind of Thanksgiving. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. Anyway, um, so this year it did. And I was probably at that time 21 years old. And my parents called their family business meeting. The subject doesn't really matter to me. Doesn't matter for the story. And because my cousins were over, my and the subject was and is still a issue that is really hard for me to understand. I don't understand it. But I'm part of that family. I'm part of the family. And to make it even worse, my cousin who came over because of the holiday, my parents said to him, um, can you quote babysit Liz? And I'm using air quotes to it around that. If you can see my my hands, um um so I would not go downstairs to listen what's going on. My parents knew that I would want to know what's going on because I'm part of the family. But they knew that I would not be able to understand it. And doctors told my parents, and we all know this, doctors told people not to, that don't let Liz or or Mary Sue or whoever to know about this because it's too hard for us to understand. And you're right, I would not understand that. And to this day, my sisters don't allow me to understand what's going on. A little bit they do, I have to say. Some I do understand. And it took my parents, it took me about 3 years to, so anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So all day I had that pain in my stomach. Kids, have you ever had that pain in your stomach that you just don't feel right about this? And I was well, we were getting ready for dinner. I was invited to have dinner with everyone, but I wasn't invited to the meeting. And I said to my sisters, I said, can I know what's going on? It really bothers me. I'm I'm very upset. And my sister said to me, oh no, we're not allowed to tell you because mom and dad told us that we're not allowed to tell you. Well, I can't blame my sisters because because they are just doing what mom and dad told them to do. Um so I later found out because I later had the courage from a doctor who helped me to talk to my parents about this. I said to my parents, I finally asked them, and they finally told me what's going on. But, and there's so many other ways that I, I don't like to brag about myself. And the last question is, I'll, I'll talk about this. It's hard for me to brag about myself. Um, but I did the Kavanaugh case, and I call it the Kavanaugh case. I testified in front of Congress um, in the first Trump administration when he nominated Judge Kavanaugh to be in the Supreme Court, and I called that case my case. Obviously, it wasn't my case. It was the Supreme. It was D. Doe versus DC, and the women who were suing people. But I called it my case because it was nothing about me, nothing about us without us. And there are so many times still in 25, people are still not including us at the table. When you talk to Robert F. the health the Secretary of Human Services, he's not including people with autism. Um, it just makes me so angry and so frustrated. So that's my um my lesson.
Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing that. And then Anita, do you have something to add?
Well, I think that what I've come to learn, and I think, kind of knew it all along, is that we have to all be a part of disabled liberation. Um, the concept of nothing about us without us leaves out one important word that I've heard you use so much, Liz, but it's not mine. Someone else said nothing about us without all of us. Because even in the disability movement, there are those of us who get left behind, you know, that if, we have intellectual disabilities, mental health disabilities, if we have high support needs, if we communicate, in different ways, um, if we're poor, um, if we're communities of color, I don't see or hear any statistics on indigenous communities, Native Americans, First Nations, communities out there. I worked, in the past with some folks, but, so what we really need to be doing, I did a talk for Juneteenth on a podcast called Push Black back in 2023. And I said, you know, if Black liberation doesn't include disabled, it isn't real liberation. Well, we in the disability community, have to, understand that it's nothing about us without all of us, and we're still struggling with that as a disability community, because we are kind of a representation, if you will, of society. And society is full of biases and hatreds and things of that nature. So then there's our disability community. I've experienced horrific racism from other disabled, horrific homophobia from other disabled. You know, um, I have, been told that some of my disabilities don't count. Um, there are those of us in the disability community who don't understand others' disabilities and have their own. So, and that reflects, that it shows up in the way that we treat each other, in the way that our movements are, and how we deal with one another. Um, and we don't want to admit that there is rampant ableism and discrimination in the disability community among ourselves. And until we stop leaving out people, it's never going to be nothing about us without us. It really needs to be nothing about us without all of us, because we're all, a part of this. I've seen the effects of disability rights and how, groups of people get left behind. I've seen how things, can get unsustainable, how we're not allowing for self care, how we're in our own silos and won't reach out, to other movements and other communities, and all. I think a lot of times we are, really, that we say, these are things that we want non-disabled to do, to treat us with dignity, with equity, and all of that. Well, we need to do that ourselves. We really do. We we need to start with us, truly with us. That's what I've learned, is that, because when I joined the disability movement, it was almost kind of like a perfect thing, like there was this camaraderie, and I'm speaking from my experience as an ADAPT member. Um, and the thing, because we were often, when ADAPT was young, we were often compared to the Black Panthers and ACT UP, and they meant it as an insult, but I took that as a badge of honor. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I spent my early childhood on the street on the south side of Chicago, where the Black Panthers were active, and the ladies from the Black Panthers would feed the kids out their house. He was a precursor, if you will, to the children's breakfast program. You know, I saw, the good that the Black Panthers did. So you couldn't tell me that they were, if you said radicals and militants, that was all about people protecting ourselves and our communities, and whatnot. And so I saw the disability movement, certainly from adapt from the perspective of an adapt member. We got respectful, we got respected, over the decades. And we disabled, we get into respectability politics as well. We were getting to the table and meeting, with presidents and things of that nature. Um, but I'm people were still being left out. And like I said, we have to, Liz, you say it all the time, all means all, you know, and you're right and we in the disability, we I think a lot of times we're saying all means all, and we're putting that message out to non-disabled. We have to bring that message in back to ourselves. Um, because we are ourselves guilty of some of the heinousness, and whatnot going on, and the exclusions and the targeting and all. And we have to make sure that we not only include that all means all, but that all are that we're not tokenizing, or we're not creating like toxic environments in our organizations and things of that nature that are pushing people out. So I'm gonna leave it, like that. Nothing about us without all of us. And I forget the name of the lady who coined this. And when I find it, I'll blast it out to the world. But that's what that is. Yeah. Thank you.
And the reason why I said all means all, if I can add to that, is because the last line of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, I get confused between those two, two documents, is justice for all. And people
Mm,
are really proud of that document. But we're not, but that they're leaving out, I think there's 60 million people on this earth with a disability. Maybe it is even more because of long COVID and all that. But but justice for all isn't justice for all because they're leaving out us.
And I think it's a carryover from just the American Revolution. The American Revolution is we didn't want England making decisions for us. We wanted the freedom. Sorry about the dogs. We wanted the freedom for our own self-advocacy as a people. And I think this is just another leaf of pulling that forward. Yes, these us people as well. Yes, all of us. We're still doing the American Revolution as we go forward.
Thank
I think
y'all.
we definitely have to work for justice within ourselves as we are working for justice without.
And if I could say something, one of the problems I think we have is the education system, which is a big bugaboo as far as I'm concerned. Because you have to remember the education system was developed because at the time, people from Southern Europe were coming into the country, not just Northern white Protestants, but Southern Catholics, etc., with religious holidays and everything that were different. And they wanted siestas and they wanted their main meal in the daytime and all different religious holidays. And so the government decided we need to put people in public school. Before then, it was private school, and people educated their people at home, if they or wherever in their communities. We got to put people in public school and teach them how to conform, how to fit in and do things in an efficient way. That there are rules and you just do it this way. And every time that gets tougher, makes it harder for people who live the world differently. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm a retired professor emeritus, and one of the things I would teach, I would take a classroom, and I would tell them first. I would tell them that I'm not the expert. I know most about what happened in the past, but the future is going to be yours. So we're here to explore. And I'll tell you what I know, but that doesn't mean it's what you should know. So exams were gone. because exams cannot lead to the future. And then I would say we would take a topic like we could take disability rights. We would take a topic and everybody would go. I would have option reading lists, but everybody would go and learn anything they could about it any way they could. And then they would come back and share it. And we would talk about it and share it. And what happened is we had people in my classroom who couldn't see, who couldn't hear, who couldn't write, who couldn't whatever. And 98% of the people in my classroom would get A's. And they said they learned more in my classrooms than they did in anything else because I wasn't primarily teaching conformity. I was opening minds and hearts to think and to be different. Be who you are, bring that to us. And I think, and that's what education does not do. It does not teach people, bring who you are and share that with us. Period. No holds barred. And we need to do that so people don't get these ideas that they have to do it in a certain way. We have to be different. And every person who is being different is a revolution for us all. Just be different, open up and go forward. It's a revolution for us all. And yet, and we have to stand together while we're doing it. So there isn't this prejudice against each other. It's wait a minute. There's a movement here of people who are different together and they're doing it together. And so, and that's the excitement. And that's the excitement, I think, of autism. That's what this group of people has brought to us is showing us, hey, and each of us in our own way is genius and to bring it forward. And the other thing that becomes important for me is the fact that everybody can contribute. So contribute. Don't spend our daily lives sitting at home thinking about ourselves only. Find a way to contribute. When you contribute, your neighborhood, whoever, they will hear about it. And it's cracking the glass. It's getting us forward. Contribute some way. It doesn't matter how it is, but we all have that to do, like the man in the iron lung. That becomes really important. Look what he did.
Thank y'all. One of my favorite things on a panel is when everybody who's speaking manages to go through a complete question before it is even brought up. We have one more planned question, and then we'll be able to open the floor for folks. Also, I want to check, because timekeeping's not my specialty. If I raise my hand like this, does that work as a signal for everybody? When you're talking, if I raise my hand up, that means you've got 1 minute left in your
No,
response before I have to bop to the next.
this Anita, that doesn't work for me because
Okay.
I'm blind.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was enough, like large enough. What's a good signal for me to give you? Is it okay if I come off mute and tell you?
Yeah, you'll have to do that. That's no problem.
Okay, cool. I just didn't want to interrupt your flow.
That's all right. I mean, gotta do what you gotta do.
Okay.
If I can't see you, you know. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
know.
no
I understand. That's why I was
problem.
like, is this a big enough like color change that you'd be able to tell? Okay. In that case, I will come off and let you know when you've got a minute left. But the question that we have, and Anita, if you'd like, I'd like to start with you, is what are some of the less talked about, like less exciting parts of movement organizing that were and are still really important to making change?
Mm, okay, so I celebrate the victories, no matter how small, and take the time out to celebrate them. When I, joined the DAP, um, and especially when I moved to Denver to work directly with Wade and those folks, um, after everything we go out to dinner, whether it was the McDonald's or whether it was a restaurant or sometimes we get together at each other's houses. And what we would do is not only kind of celebrate, but debrief, go over things. When you've done a protest or you've done an action or you've done a campaign or some event, even if it's, you're scouring the hill, as I call it, visiting, you know, congressmen, you know, you got to get together and debrief and talk about what went well and what could have went a little better. What would you do, a little different, next time? Um, and it's not an exciting, if you will, part of organizing, and sometimes it's a little scary because if you're not careful, session or whatnot, but done, right and everything, it's critical that you know that you do celebrate your victories and not only just the clear ones. um and know that this you're not going to get a lot of times you're not going to get a victory in days or weeks. We're talking months, years, decades, literally. Um, and so you always have to celebrate those victories, and have to you have to debrief. That's so critical because you go and do and you don't know, you know what I mean? Um, if you go and you do an action and you just go and disperse into the wind, rather than coming back and talking about it, you don't know what mistakes you've made or whatnot. And it's the less glorious part, if you will, of activism and whatnot, but always that check in, that that debriefing, that coming together, and the celebrations, even the little small celebrations.
Thank you. That's actually one of my favorite parts is I call it the parking lot conversation. Uh, Liz, would you be down to go next?
Yes. And luckily, the fire alarm just stopped, so you don't have to hear that noise. I hope I'm answering your question well. The less exciting part of the movement is just, as Anita said, we just need to be strong and advocate for ourselves. But also, what's exciting for me is the knowing the next generation is coming up and they're they're speaking up for themselves. I know for a fact that I've been working with Think College students who are going to post-secondary education program, and there are over 300 colleges that have programs around the country. So these students are going to Capitol Hill, just like um, just like Anita and I, or when we advocate for to our members of Congress or whoever, um, and why that is so exciting to me is that the next generation is taking over because I won't be here for all my life. I would like to retire someday. As I like to often say, I would like to go to Ireland and just tour around. Um, and maybe, maybe read or sleep the entire day. And somebody else needs to advocate. And I know for a fact that there are people who can advocate just as well as I can. So I feel very comfortable that tomorrow, if tomorrow the day, I don't want tomorrow to be the day I'm not ready to retire. But I but I know that if if tomorrow is the day, or tomorrow, God forbid, got hit by a car or whatever, um, then these students can take up the mantle and we'll be fine.
Thank you,
I hope
Liz.
I answered your question.
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about that passing and like passing between generations, and also why I really like um collective, like organizing together as a group and getting to talk with folks who are in different time places in our lives. I think it's really important. Candace, would you like to go?
I always mute myself because I have this dog. So anyway, as a Native American, as a Mohawk, Haudenosaunee, we have only one law. And the law is the seven generations law. In every action I do, every day, I have to think about the people going back seven generations and what they went through for me to be here. And I want their lives, that I want them to see, if they're up there somewhere, that what they did was worth it. That I'm not just sitting on my duff doing nothing. It was worth it. And the other part of that is the seven generations forward. I want people seven generations forward to be in a better place. So I have to think about that too. Now, that doesn't mean I don't, my car or use heat for the house because it's going to pollute. Um, I have to take myself enough to live here. And those things are required for me to take care of myself to live here. But I can take everything conscientiously. And it doesn't mean obsess on it, but it does mean to think that way. And part of that way is how I treat other people and what I expect from them, and what my biases are. I have led a number of boards in my life. And whenever I have a board, I always put a few people on the board who completely oppose everything I'm doing. They're the most important people to me. I want the opposition where I can see them and hear them because they're going to teach me what I see and I don't know. If we were a company and we were going to build a car and it was the best car in the world and everybody looked at it, it would get out in public, and then it would have faults because we didn't see them because we loved it so much. We would not see the wrong with what we're thinking. Other people who oppose us see for us. So I tend to wine and dine people who disagree with me because they're my most important allies. They're not my enemies, they're my allies. They're only enemies if they're mean and cruel, at which point I'm going to step away a little bit, pray for them, keep the door open for the future. But those people who see differently than I do are most important to me to when I was teaching, I often would take an extra job teaching at a conservative business school just because
1 minute,
all,
Candace.
pardon me,
Your 1 minute. This is your 1 minute mark.
all my biases would be apparent at that point in time. So the word recognize means a lot to me. It doesn't mean just see what you see. It means recognize situations so you can see possibilities.
Thank you. I think that's one of the key points in movement is being able to sit with each other because we're not going to all agree. I'm a Southern organizer and I'm very familiar with that. Yep. And we are now at the point where we can open to Q&A. We have 7 minutes left on the clock. And we have one Q&A question open right now. So we might have time for one more after this one if folks have anything. But the question we have is, how did the 1960s scoop and the residential schools intersect with autism? And since we're at Q&A and this one's not planned, I'll let y'all give me a cue if you have an answer for this.
I
What was
was
the
too
question?
I was too young. I was born in 66, so I was too young, so I can't say anything.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, of course. And then, how did the 1960s scoop and the residential schools intersect with autism?
And I guess I'm not picking up a word. Are you saying scoop?
Oh, yes, scoop.
S.
And Candace, I did see you raise your hand. Do you have thoughts on this question?
A little. I don't know that I would do justice, but I'm apparently the older one here. And I was also on a team to break down and close the state institution in New Hampshire in the 80s. So one of the things that happened was we started pulling people, recognizing that people could not just sit in institutions. We started that in the 60s, looking at that. But the question became what to do with them. And we had to start questioning diagnoses and assumptions. And with autism, there was an assumption that people who had autism could not ever bond with other people, that they were so isolated in themselves that they would never be a social human being. And the idea, of course, it was psychology at that time, was if you didn't become very social, you weren't a healthy human being. So it was a write-off. And what was used in the institutions at the time was electrotherapy on people with autism. I remember one organization in San Bernardino in early 70s when I was, and they would take a person with autism and put them in actually, and call that person to come to them. And when that person would come, they would shock them. And they would keep shocking them until the person came. Well, the problem was, of course, the person knew that they were being shocked by these people who were calling them to come to them. And so they weren't going to come. And it didn't work. It was the time of behaviorism. Everything was reward and punishment in those days. And so the prognosis was these people so pre-human that could not even move on, even to get away from electricity. Look forward, see how far we've come. It's incredible, but it took a lot and a lot of fighting along the way to say, wait a minute, there's difference here. There's a difference.
And they're still doing that today at the Judge
Mhm.
Rottenberg Center. In
Yep.
2016, um, Adapt went and we were the first organization that literally made it onto the property and shut the property down. So a bunch of us were arrested. But interestingly, nothing was done about our case because the chief of police had actually testified before the United Nations about the situation at Judge Rottenberg Center and how dangerous it was. And what a lot of people don't realize about Judge Rottenberg, and this is what I'm talking about, the disposability of people of color. 85% of the folks in Judge Rottenberg Center are people of color and come from out of state. See, you can't do that in Massachusetts. But see, I live in New York. I live in Rochester, New York. And the vast majority of those folks at Judge Rottenberg Center come out of New York State and they're people of color. And I met survivors of Judge Rottenberg Center. And like I said, I was arrested at Judge Rottenberg Center in 2016. They're still doing that to us. We're still trying to get, I know Autistic Self Advocacy Network, there's been autistic activists that's been working on this since like the 70s and whatnot. Adapt started, I want to say probably in like maybe 2013, 14, and whatnot. But this is, it's still happening. And when I was a kid, my parents were encouraged to institutionalize me. They actually were encouraged to let me die. Fortunately, they did not do that, nor did they institutionalize me. But I had very significant support needs, and there was no, you know, uh, it, it, it's a presumption of incompetence. It's like you're presumed to be not able to do, you know, anything. You can't do this. They look at you, they look at your disability, they look at your diagnosis, and they say, well, okay, according to this, you can't do that. And I have a sister, a twin sister, who's non-disabled. And I was expected to do everything that she did, literally. Um, and it did teach me that if I put my mind to it and I could figure out alternative ways to do things. But um, the presumption of like, okay, fine, you can't do it. We're going to automatically assume that you can't do it. I think that's, the biggest thing. I tell people my biggest problem about disability and being disabled is not the fact of my own disabilities. And I have multiple disabilities, some of them congenital, some of them life threatening and whatnot. But
Anita, one more
it's
minute and then we have to wrap.
cool. But it's um, my biggest problem is society's attitude and the things that they do to us and um, what RFK is talking about doing. And you know, we don't need that. But I'm going to end on the hopeful note that we need to come together as people and disabled people, um, work together, love together, and fight this injustice. All of us, for all of us.
And can I just add, and this will take a minute or two.
Yeah.
When I grew up sitting at the table in family activities, um, although that I wasn't always included in discussion, I was never really. include you in discussion, and I told you that story. But when I guess I was 17 years old, the typical age where you talk to your parents about what you wanted to do. And I said I wanted to be a lobbyist. Um, and my parents' eyes popped and thought that I was had a deer, um, 2 ears in my skull. I mean, two um cow ears or whatever the saying is. Um, but I said, but eventually I was put in a library, doing a lot of work. But guess what I'm doing today? I'm not a lobbyist because there's only one. There's not um I don't want that piece of paper. But don't ever tell me that I'm not a lobbyist because I do go up on Capitol Hill. I do go. I testified. I told you that I have testified. I also have written a book about it called All Means All My Life in Advocacy. You can buy it on Amazon. And if you don't like Amazon, and I understand why, um, um, email me, through Facebook, and, I can send you a copy of my book. But it has a lot. It's my the lessons that I've learned throughout my life.
Thank you. And I apologize. I've cheated as long as I can because frankly I could listen to y'all talk all night. Thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in to this session. As we close out, we do want to let everyone know there will be a video of this panel available on ASAN's YouTube channel sometime over the next couple days. And again, the ASN Gala would not be possible without everybody here in the audience tonight and those who have sponsored us. If you would like to support ASN in our mission, please do again consider becoming a member. Ongoing support from the community allows us to keep doing our work, and it would not be possible without you. Thank you again to Anita, Candace, and Liz, and to everyone who's come tonight. We cherish this time in our community and that we have gotten together, and I really hope to see you all in the next panel. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.